Many times over the last years, it's been related that in those years with Divine Mother, it was witnessed that there were many occasions when people would come to her and say, "Oh, Divine Mother, I have this friend who wants to see you." And she would respond, "Yes, yes, yes, tell them to come tomorrow," or "Yes, yes, bring them along," or "Tell them to call me." Or she would say, "No, no, they're not ready, no." And she wasn't psychic. She didn't pause for a moment and tune into that person and then give the answer. It was totally and absolutely spontaneous. And myself and many, many others would shake our heads and think, how does she do that? Or people would come who hadn't seen her for many, many years, and she would take up with them exactly where it was that they'd left off those many years ago, as though there had been no time and space in between. And then there's a story with a strange title that was told some time ago that's entitled How St. Peter Became Bald. And the story is that one day Jesus and St. Peter were walking down the road on a pilgrimage, and they'd been to many villages teaching and healing and gathering people together and so forth. But then as they were traveling on the road, they came across a farmer whose wagon had turned over in a ditch. And there was wheat, and there were eggs and milk all over. And the man, who was rather fat and ruddy, was on his knees by his wagon. And as they approached, they could see that he was deep in prayer. He was saying, "Oh Lord, I deserve this. I have sinned. I have not been a good person. Yes, I have." And so, of course, St. Peter, hearing this from the farmer, said to Jesus, "Oh, what a good and pious man. We should stop and help him." Jesus said, "Keep walking." St. Peter was very surprised, but he had to do what his master said, and so they kept walking along the road, leaving the farmer with his wagon and all his goods spread out or in the ditch. But not too much farther along the road, they came to another man whose wagon had lost a wheel and tipped over in the ditch, and there was hay and wood all over the place. And he too was on his knees, but instead of praying, he was cursing. He was using language that even an old sea salt would blush at, talking about wagons that made love with their mothers and all kinds of terrible, terrible language. So, of course, St. Peter said to Jesus, "Oh, let's keep going." Jesus said, "Stop, stop." And he went over to St. Peter's great surprise, and he said to the farmer or the woodman, "Spotted trouble." And, of course, the man sent a vitriolic stream of language at Jesus, saying, "What business is it of yours?" and cursing him roundly. And all of a sudden, Jesus socked him on the jaw, knocked him right out, cold. And he was a wiry, big man. Well, St. Peter was horrified. Over all of these years, hadn't he, Jesus said 1,000 times, "Non-hurting and turn the other cheek." And here he's socking this farmer, knocking him out cold on the side of the road. And while St. Peter was observing this, to his very great surprise, there was Jesus down by the wagon with his walking stick under the wheels and lifting it up, and before time had passed very long, there was the wagon back on its wheels and the wood and the hay back where it was, even though that the man was still lying out cold by the side of the road. So, of course, Jesus went off jauntily down the road, and St. Peter running him after him, wanting to ask him the question, but, Jesus was whistling and not appearing to take any notice of St. Peter at all, and St. Peter's walking along trying to work out what it was that had happened here. And of course, St. Peter, even though he was a fisherman, was a very rational and a very logical man. Before he went out fishing, he would see which way the tides were going and which way the wind was blowing, and all of those other things that one observes in life. I mean, he didn't catch fish all the time, but he was a rational and logical man, so he was trying to figure out for himself, why did Jesus do that? Well, they stopped a bit further on because the sun was at its apex and it was very hot. So they sat down under a tree, and St. Peter was just about to ask questions of Jesus, but before doing so, he presented his case, the things that he'd been thinking about. Well, was it this or was it that? Why you did this because of? And Jesus congratulated him on his rational, logical thinking, and promptly went to sleep, leaving St. Peter completely bamboozled. And after Jesus woke up from his sleep and they resumed their journey, St. Peter started to harangue Jesus with questions, because even though Jesus had congratulated him on his rational, logical abilities, St. Peter knew that there was not quite right, there was something else there. But Jesus just completely ignored him. So St. Peter started scratching his head. It wasn't too long before he was completely bald. So this brings up a poser for us. Now, for instance, if we come to a beggar or a homeless person on the street, and maybe we have our conditioning, which is, I never give to beggars, or my mother told me that I should never take any notice of homeless people. Or perhaps we have that too-gooding conditioning and we stop for every beggar and give something out of our pockets. Or do we approach the homeless or the beggar and without a thought put our hand in our pocket to take out what we have there, or walk past? Or maybe if we come across an accident on the road, and as we're driving up we assess the situation, the ambulance is there, or there's someone out helping, I don't need to stop, or we think, I have to get out and help here. Or do we, when we're approaching, without a thought, turn our car towards the scene of the accident, or drive past? And what does this indicate for us about where we're at? Is it that we look at what Divine Mother had, or Jesus Christ, and we consider that these are siddhis, like those gifts that come with enlightenment or realization? Where are we at? What is it indicative of for us? What is the meaning of it? Why did St. Peter scratch his head to baldness, trying to figure it out? Why? Where are we? What is it that's present when stillness and movement meet? Or, translated, the mind has been purged of its conditioning. Our karma has been spent. We find ourselves in a state of still presence, permanent and unchanging. And when the situations of life are encountered, what is needed to do or not do is there, unbidden, without thought. Where are you? Thank you.